Hello.
What's up, family?
We took a long break between episodes.
We did.
We had some things to get off of our chest that were not podcast appropriate. So, I mean, I'm sure that they would be appropriate for a podcast, but not this one, because we're trying to keep this one, you know, it's a nice, safe place for y'all to come whenever. Yeah. So this week we're going to tell you all about the Civil War.
Yes and no.
I mean, not all about the Civil War.
We're not giving you like a whole history lesson. There's some fun facts.
Yeah, I've got some facts that I was super into. Like, I was like, let me distract myself with something that feels reminiscent. And I really, really enjoyed finding these facts.
I enjoyed this episode. I went a
lot more than I thought I was going to. At first, I was like, "Is this going to be a good episode?" And then the way that I structured my notes, I was like, "This is going to be a good episode. I'm going to have fun with this."
I enjoyed it. We've got those fun facts, some cool stories.
Like, fun facts about the Civil War.
Yeah, some cool stories. And then I found some spooky stories that are Civil War related.
I didn't put in here like the big one because I could not remember if I talked about Lincoln's ghost.
I feel like it's been mentioned, that? Yes.
Okay, because I know it was in one of the books that I read for that one episode we did. So I couldn't remember, so I didn't put it in here about him like predicting his death and stuff. So I don't know, if I go back and listen to that episode and find that I didn't in fact talk about it, I might have to, but just because I think it's insane.
Am I starting this one off?
Yes.
Okay. So first story I've got to share, and I hate saying I enjoy.
So bad.
Brittany fell at
a Chamber of Commerce event. My ass was out, skinned my elbow, and my elbow still hurts. It's a week later.
Lord. Anyway. I hate saying I like a story that's ultimately sad.
Yeah.
But I really liked the story.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't like the ideas behind it, but it was an interesting...
Right.
It was an interesting journey to get to this point.
Right. See, that's like, I did all my facts and then I had a story at the end and I was like, I'm going to save that because I want to look more into that.
Right.
And then I did, and I was like, oh, this is fascinating.
All right. So this first one is the National Soldiers Orphans Homestead. So the National Soldiers Orphans Homestead is in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and it has a history that started well before it was known for being a haunted spot. So I did go into the history on these. I pulled a page from your book, and that last one, the last story that I have, we'll get there.
Yeah.
History rich, okay?
Okay.
So the two-story brick house was built in 1836, and it would be purchased in 1844 by Captain John Myers and his wife Esther. In 1863, as the Battle of Gettysburg was going on, the home was used as a headquarters for Major General Oliver O. Howard and the, I'm going to say 11 or XI Corps, and also it was also a field hospital. After the war in 1865, Dr. John F. Bournes decided to make it a home for the multitude of orphan children, many of whom became orphans as a result of Union soldier deaths. Dr. Bournes had heard of a story of Sergeant Amos Humiston, who was found deceased at Gettysburg holding a picture of his 3 children, and felt as though something needed to be done. His campaign to identify Humiston and his family aided in the funding to serve a larger initiative and help children of falling soldiers. The home was officially dedicated as the National Soldiers Orphans Homestead on November 20th of 1866. Initially, Philinda Humiston, Sergeant Humiston's widow, cared for the home and the children. it became a safe and happy, well, as happy as it could be, place for the kids to be. With strong community involvement, the orphanage was a well-managed and well-organized institution. Once expansion began to house more children as awareness of its mission, or due to the awareness of its mission, Felinda remarried and moved to Massachusetts and handed the management position over to Rosa J. Carmichael. As you may guess, it wasn't long until things changed. In 1873, abuse began to be reported. It was noticed that it was rare for the children to be seen, and when they were, their clothes were rags. Community members became more and more concerned when the children did not show for the annual Memorial Day Parade in 1876. Normally, the kids would put flowers on soldiers' graves, and the Grand Army of the Republic chapter decided to investigate and found the truth about this trunchbull-ass bitch. So they arrested her for the abuse, and she was convicted of aggravated assault. However, they only fined her a measly $20 damn. I say that, but in all honesty, it would have been equivalent to nearly $600 today. And she was also ordered to leave the town. Now, one would hope that this is where the story ends. However, her reign of terror continued. She refused to leave and barricaded herself inside the homestead. At this point, for whatever reason, no one could stop her. She apparently locked children in outhouses despite freezing temperatures. I saw a story where 2 men were out walking on Christmas Eve of that same year, and they heard some crying. They followed the sound and found a 4-year-old little boy that was locked inside of an outhouse. He was dressed in a threadbare nightshirt. This triggered another more in-depth investigation, and it was found that the kids were shoeless, in rags. Some wore hobbling chains. Oh my God. There was even chains in the basement where she had been locking them down in what they called the dungeon, or what she called the dungeon. Yeah. They were chained also to the walls of the cellar. Some were placed in vats of water. Aww. The poor things would nearly drown as their bodies grew tired and gave up on them. The children were up front and told that she abused them, but also that there was a few 14 to 19-year-old boys that were tasked to help her with her punishments. Mm-hmm. Many children were reported missing and never recovered, but no murder charges were ever brought up. The orphanage was finally closed in June of 1877, and the children were relocated. Rosa was finally forced out of Gettysburg. Though she was gone, the building held on to that trauma that was brought on in those walls. The building was repurposed several times. It was a duplex in 1903, an Airbnb, or a bed and breakfast in 1915, and later a diorama museum. Finally, in 2013, Ghostly Images Tours took home there and made it a site for historical and paranormal exploration. As one can imagine, the stamp left there has continued to play out. Visitors have reported children's laughter and cries where there are none present, full-bodied apparitions of disheveled children, and just an overall feeling of sadness and anxiety in the basement almost as soon as you start to make your descent down the stairs. Shockingly, and I guess to add to the historical accuracy, the chains used on the children still remain in the basement. They can be heard clinking. Other reports tell about toys being moved, orbs, streaks of lights and pictures, and white mist. Some have also captured what appears to be an angry woman's face in pictures believed to be Rosa.
Damn.
Right.
All right.
So give us some of your
I'll go through rapid fire.
Or if you want to do all of your facts, and then you said you had a couple stories?
It's sprinkled in. There's some longer ones. But I'll just go through a bunch of them. Until I get tired of talking.
Okay.
So I titled this little section, Facts About the Civil War That I Didn't Know, and maybe you didn't either.
Okay.
So Abraham Lincoln referred to Robert E. Lee as Bobby Lee and Jefferson Davis as Jeffy D. Even though he served as a member of the House of Representatives and a senator on 2 separate occasions, Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederate States, never completed a full term in any office he ever held. Loser. The Medal of Honor. The Medal of Honor was awarded to more people in the Civil War than in World War I, World War II, and Vietnam combined.
Nice.
The cipher code that was used by the Confederate government, including by Jefferson Davis himself, was found on John Wilkes Booth's remains, which led many to believe that Davis had ordered the assassination on Lincoln.
That's one I've never heard.
Yeah. John Wilkes Booth's assassination of Lincoln was part of a bigger conspiracy. This one I did know. On the same night, an assailant known as Lewis Powell attempted to kill Secretary of State William Seward. A third conspirator was tasked with assassinating Vice President Andrew Johnson, but they got nervous and instead just went to a tavern. Me as an assassin, I'd be like, no, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to get some like mozzarella sticks or something. Canada was not quiet during the Civil War. Once, the Confederate Secret Service took refuge in Montreal, and when a group of Confederates raided Vermont from Quebec, the Canadian authorities captured and then released the men, much to the dismay of the Union Army. This one, I wasn't able to find much more information about it, but the hip pocket was invented by the U.S. Army during the Civil War. During the Civil War era, it was commonly thought that if a cannon was fired over water, that corpses would float to the surface. And an example of this thinking is found in The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Yeah, the 1830 census showed that in some rare cases there were black slave owners.
I know that.
Yeah, it was very few and far between. More than 3 million men found in the war, or died in the war, and nearly 2%. No, hold on. Let me start over. Me and my typos. More than 3 million men fought in the war.
There we go.
Fought in the war, and nearly 2% of the population, more than 620,000, died in it. While many died on the battlefield, for every one that died on the battlefield, 2 died of disease.
Oh.
Yeah, disease was the number one killer in the Civil War. More Americans fell in just 2 days at Shiloh on the banks of the Tennessee River than in all previous American wars combined. The Battle of Antietam was the single bloodiest day of the Civil War, with 12,401 Union men were being killed, missing, or wounded, which was double the casualty count of D-Day. There was a total of 23,000 casualties on both sides that day.
I think that's also in one of my next stories.
7,000 Americans fell in just 20 minutes at Cold Harbor, Virginia.
Wow.
During the Battle of Antietam, Clara Barton was tending the wounded so close to the fighting that a bullet went through her sleeve and killed a man that she had been treating.
That's crazy.
Future Chief Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. was wounded 3 times during the Civil War. He was shot in the chest at Ball's Bluff. He was shot in the back at Antietam and in the heel at Chancellorsville.
How you get shot in the heel?
That bullet's just going. On May 13th, 1865, a month after Robert E. Lee surrendered, Private John J. Williams of the 34th Indiana became the last man killed in the Civil War. The final skirmish of the Civil War was in a battle at Palmetto Ranch in Texas and was a Confederate victory. Senator John J. Crittenden of Kentucky had 2 sons who became major generals during the Civil War, one for the North and one for the South. And Ulysses S. Grant was not a fan of ceremonies or military music, once grumbling that he could recognize only two tunes, saying one was Yankee Doodle and the other one wasn't. On July 4th, 1863, after being under siege for 48 days, Confederate General John C. Pemberton surrendered the city of Vicksburg to Union General Ulysses S. Grant. The result was that the 4th of July was not celebrated in Vicksburg for another 81 years.
Nice.
In November of 1863, President Abraham Lincoln was invited to offer a few appropriate remarks at the opening of a new Union cemetery being founded in Gettysburg. The primary speaker was a celebrated orator from Massachusetts who spoke for nearly 2 hours. I can just imagine. You imagine President Lincoln. Civil War's over. He's ready to just kick back. He's aged 30 years over the war. Okay? Yeah. He's ready to kick back. He's got to listen to this dude talk for 2 hours. And then Lincoln offered just 269 words in his Gettysburg address. He was like, that's it. That's all you're getting. In 1864, Ulysses S. Grant, or Ulysses, I don't know. I have a hard time saying it. I'm going to stick with Ulysses S. Grant was promoted to lieutenant general, a rank that had previously been held by General George Washington, and he led the 533,000 men of the Union Army, the largest in the world. Just 3 years later, he was elected to President of the United States. On November 9th, 1863, President Lincoln attended Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. and saw The Marble Heart. Accomplished actor John Wilkes Booth was in the cast.
Nice.
On March 4th, 1865, Lincoln was inaugurated for a second term, and just yards away stood John Wilkes Booth with a pistol in his pocket. He had a vantage point from a balcony and later said that this offered him an excellent chance to kill the president if I had wished. Hiram Revels of Mississippi became the first black man to be elected to the U.S. Senate. He filled the seat that was last held by Jefferson Davis. At the beginning of the war, the value of all manufactured goods that were produced in the Confederate States added up to less than 1/4 of those produced in just the state of New York alone. In both the North and the South, potential recruits to this one I found fascinating. Potential recruits to the military were offered incentives, or they called them bounties, for enlisting. As much as $677 was incentivized in New York. Bounty jumping soon became a profession, and men would sign up, desert, and then enlist again somewhere else.
Nice.
One man repeated this process 32 times before he was caught. It doesn't matter.
That's a business-minded son of a bitch right there.
So, and it doesn't matter at what point in time, if somebody sees a loophole, they're taking advantage of it. In 1862, the U.S. Congress authorized the first, can you imagine, the war is getting ready to start. They authorized the first paper currency, which was called greenbacks. And staying with currency, the words "In God We Trust" first appeared on a U.S. coin in 1864. Black Americans constituted less than 1% of the northern population, yet by the end of the war, they made up 10% of the Union Army.
Nice.
A total of 180,000 black men, more than 85% of those eligible, enlisted. Speaking of black soldiers, when they began to sign up with the Union Army in early 1863, they were paid $10 a month. But white soldiers were paid at least $13 a month, with officers earning more. To add insult to injury, black soldiers were also charged a $3 monthly fee for their clothing, which lowered their pay to $7. Because of this, the highest paid black soldier earned approximately half of what the lowest paid white soldier's salary was. Pressure from abolitionist congressmen and the courage of black soldiers in combat persuaded Congress to rectify the pay structure. I think the black soldiers ended up protesting by not collecting their earnings. In September 1864, black soldiers finally received equal pay that was retroactive to their enlistment date.
Nice.
For many soldiers, this meant that they were finally earning enough money to send back home to their families.
Nice.
Missouri sent 39 regiments to fight the siege of Vicksburg. 17 of those went to the Confederacy, and 22 of those went to the Union. This one, whenever I think about that statue that used to sit off of I-65, this one made me think of that, because just the face.
Yeah.
Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest had 30 horses shot from under him, and he personally killed 31 men in hand-to-hand combat, saying, "I was a horse ahead at the time." What? By the end of the war, Unionists from every state except for South Carolina had sent regiments to fight for the North. This one's a little bit of a longer one. So, as the Civil War descended on the state of Virginia, General Lee and his wife Mary fled their 1,100-acre Virginia estate known as Arlington, which overlooked Washington, D.C. And in 1863, the U.S. government confiscated the property for non-payment of taxes in the amount of $92.07. They saw an opportunity and they took it. Meanwhile, Lincoln granted permission for a cemetery to be built on the property, including a burial vault on the estate's former rose garden. The idea was that if Lee were to decide to return, he would have to look at the graves and see the carnage that he had created.
Nice.
According to his biographer, Elizabeth Brown Pryor. In the years after the war, the Lees did quietly look into how to reclaim Arlington. However, they decided not to take action prior to their deaths. But in 1877, their eldest son, George Washington Custis Lee, sued the federal government for illegally seizing Arlington, and the Supreme Court agreed and gave Arlington back to him. But what was the Lee family going to do with an estate filled with corpses? George Lee sold the property back to the government for $150,000, and over time, more than 250,000 soldiers have been buried in what is now called Arlington National Cemetery.
Nice. That's a cool fact.
Yeah. And then this is my last one. So, you go ahead.
Okay. Ooh, and this one's long, too.
Yeah. It really... I went down a rabbit hole.
Okay. So, my next one is Antietam. So, the way that it's spelled was not computing in my brain on what it was.
Me too. I had to look it up.
I did too. And then I sat and argued, but I argued with TJ on how to pronounce it for a good 5 minutes before I was like, let me just Google it.
Yeah. I kept looking at it and I was like, I want to say it's Antietam, but I'm afraid if I say that,
because somebody's
going to make fun of me.
It sounded like familiar to me. I was like, seeing it spelled out, I was like, I don't know what this is. I've never heard of that. And then I got to reading it and I was like, I should have heard about this.
Right.
And I was like, what is that? And then he said that and I was like, that's not that. Anyway, so I may repeat some of the information you already said, but the Battle of Antietam, fought on September 17th, 1862, near Sharpsburg, Maryland, remains the bloodiest single-day battle in American history, with over 23,000 casualties. Union and Confederate forces clashed on the battlefield, where the Confederate Army, led by General Robert E. Lee, faced off against Union troops under General George McClellan. The battle lasted 12 hours, with a casualty every 2 seconds on average, and resulted in about 12,410 Union and 10,700 Confederate soldiers killed or wounded. The battle unfolded in 3 phases. The Union's morning attacks were met with fierce resistance, particularly in the cornfield and Westwoods, where Union casualties were heavy. By afternoon, 2 Union divisions broke the Confederate line at Bloody Lane, but McClellan failed to capitalize on the advantage. The Union's final flanking effort was stalled at Burnside Bridge, where 500 Georgians held their ground. Confederate General A.P. Hill arrived with reinforcements just in time to save the Confederate Army, and the battle ended in exhaustion, with Lee withdrawing the next day. Though neither side gained a decisive victory, the battle allowed President Abraham Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1863, which freed enslaved people in the South. The battlefield, later designated as Antietam National Battlefield in 1933, is now a solemn site with numerous monuments, historical markers, and interpretive trails. One of the most haunting places at the battlefield is Bloody Lane, a sunken farm road where intense fighting took place. Approximately 5,500 soldiers were killed or wounded in just a few hours, and the road is now known for its eerie atmosphere. Visitors have reported ghostly sightings and strange sounds, including gunfire when no one is nearby. Some have even seen apparitions of Confederate soldiers walking the lane, while others have heard chants resembling the Irish Brigade's battle cry. Burnside's Bridge, another site of intense fighting, is also known for paranormal activity. At night, visitors have reported seeing blue lights and hearing drumming along with eerie sounds. The Pry House and Piper House, both located on the battlefield, are also considered haunted, with stories of footsteps and ghostly apparitions. The St. Paul Episcopal Church in Sharpsburg.
Episcopal.
Whatever. I always say Episcopal. I've literally always said that. Episcopal?
Mm-hmm.
I have never.
Episcopal.
Okay, anyway. Was used as a Confederate hospital after the battle, is said to still echo the screams of the wounded and dying. The battlefield itself, remarkably well preserved, remains much like it looked in 1862, offering visitors a glimpse into the past. The park provides a self-guided driving tour, walking trails, and historical markers that allow people to experience the key locations where the battle unfolded. This site is accessible and open to the public, offering a somber and reflective environment for those interested in its pivotal moment in American history. In addition to the military stories, the battlefield also holds the personal stories of soldiers and civilians, including Nurse Clara Barton, photographer Alexander Gardner, and 15-year-old bugler Johnny Cook, who became a hero for his actions under fire. Gardner's photographs are of the aftermath of the battle, showing the horrific scale of death, shocked audiences at the time. The legacy of the Battle of Antietam endures in both the historical significance and of the event and the lingering spirits of those who fought there. I always think of, like, when we talk about Gettysburg, makes me think of that movie, Remember the Titans?
Yeah.
When he took them out there to that battlefield.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a question, though. And I thought about this while I was writing it, and I meant to ask it beforehand. Well, remember that house that me and that one person that we used to be friends with and the photographer friend, we all went without you, and you got real upset?
Yeah.
It was part of something. It's a historic site.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that sounds right.
It was Revolutionary War. Yeah, the American Revolution. Okay. Yeah, you pull up on it and you can just, like, picture, like, old school war planning maps, chess pieces, you know? And then, like, when we were in there, there was one room where it sounded like there was a fan, just a circular fan that's on a stand that you put in your living room, you know?
Yeah.
It sounded like that was running, but there was no electricity to the building.
Oh.
And so we got to thinking about it. It sounded like drums off in the distance, but it was only in that room.
Damn, I wish I was there to hear it.
Yeah. You would have loved it. Maybe we'll go another day. It's quite a ways from us, though. It's in Castilian Springs.
Oh, that's not that far.
No, but it seemed like it took forever to get there that day.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was the end of that story.
Okay.
And then I have my last one. That's fairly lengthy.
Push in the grocery order for banana.
Okay.
So this one I got.
Is this your last period?
This is my last one, period. Okay. So the initial fact just said Confederate Private Henry Stanley fought for the 6th Arkansas. He was captured at Shiloh, but he survived and would go on to go to Africa to find Dr. Livingstone. That was all it said. Okay. Me. Who's Dr. Livingstone?
Yeah.
Why did he go to Africa to find him? Okay. So, I got a little curious. So on March 21st, 1871, Henry Morton Stanley set out from the African port of Bagamoyo. Okay. On what he had hoped would be the adventure of his career. The then 30-year-old journalist had arrived at the behest of the New York Herald, but he wasn't chasing down just any story. He had been placed in charge of an expedition to find explorer David Livingstone, who had vanished in the heart of Africa several years prior. Stanley was a Welsh-born orphan who had fought on both sides of the American Civil War, so this is just like an American Civil War soldier. And he took this mission on with gusto. So, despite having never even set foot in Africa before, he had assembled a caravan of over 100 porters and set out into the unknown. He later wrote, "Wherever Livingstone is, be sure I shall not give up the chase. If alive, you shall hear what he has to say. If dead, I will find him and bring his bones to you." At that time, Stanley began his mission. Dr. David Livingstone was the most renowned of all the explorers of Africa. Amongst other things, the Scottish missionary and abolitionist had survived a lion attack, charted the Zambezi River, and walked from one side of the continent to the other. In 1866, and in the 1800s, that sounds absolutely miserable.
Right.
In 1866, he embarked on what should have been his great finale of an expedition, a quest to locate the fabled source of the Nile River. This mission was to last 2 years, but by 1871, nearly 6 years had gone by, and there were only a few very scattered updates on Livingstone's whereabouts. Many Europeans had just thought he had died, and that was it. But Stanley knew that there had been a sighting of Livingstone in the vicinity of Lake Tanganyika, but reaching the area would end up being a monumental task. Between March and October of 1871, the New York Herald expedition faced several setbacks as they trudged through miles of swampland and jungle. Crocodiles and swarming tsetse flies killed their pack animals, and dozens of porters abandoned the caravan or died from disease. Stanley himself was ravaged by dysentery, smallpox, and a near-fatal case of cerebral malaria. But nevertheless, he urged his party forward at a breakneck pace. By the time they arrived in a small remote village that is now Tanzania, they had crossed over 700 miles of territory.
Holy.
On November 10th, 1871, after hearing rumors of a white man living in the village, Stanley donned his finest clothes and entered the town with a small band of followers. Locals began to crowd around them, and Stanley spied a sickly-looking European with white hair and a disheveled beard. He sensed that he had located his man, and he approached him, extended his hand, and asked a now famous question. "Dr. Livingstone, I presume?" When the stranger gave the affirmative, Stanley let out a sigh of relief and said, "I thank God, doctor, I have been permitted to see you." Stanley would soon learn that Livingstone had been languishing in the heart of Africa for several years. The Nile expedition had been wrought with thievery and mass desertions by his porters, and several tropical diseases had all but totally sapped his strength and forced him to travel with Arab slave traders. He had been slowly wasting away in a small hut when the relief operation finally reached him. Despite his poor health state, Livingstone refused the offer to return home. After he was resupplied by Stanley, he resumed his search for the source of the Nile. He parted ways with his rescuers in March of 1872 and made his way south to Lake Bangweulu, which is modern-day Zambia. On May 1st, 1873, though, his illnesses caught up to him and he died from malaria and dysentery. Even though Livingstone's career as an explorer was coming to an end, Stanley's was just beginning. Upon returning from the expedition, he became something of a celebrity and later penned a best-selling book titled How I Found Livingstone. 2 years after the initial Livingstone expedition, he grew bored of being a reporter and decided to return to Africa to pick up where Livingstone left off. Over the course of 999 days, he and his party successfully trekked into Africa's central watershed, scouring its lakes in a 24-foot boat. He became the first person to circumnavigate Lake Victoria, which is Africa's largest body of water. He later charted Lake Tanganyika before venturing 1,800 miles down the Congo River to the Atlantic Ocean. Approximately half of the 227 members of the expedition party died from either disease, drowning, and repeated altercations with native tribes. Nevertheless, the geographical achievements during that expedition helped to make Stanley's name as an adventurer. In 1878, Mark Twain argued that Stanley is almost the only man alive today whose name and work will be familiar 100 years hence, which I didn't know who this man was. I ain't even gonna lie. But, like so many men before and since, his subsequent activities in Africa would forever tarnish his legacy. In 1878, the explorer signed on with King Leopold II of Belgium for a project to bring trade and Christianity to the African Congo. Originally, this expedition was sold to Stanley as a sweeping humanitarian effort, but in reality, King Leopold was only using charity as a screen to create a Congo-free state, whose people and resources he would go on to exploit for his own enrichment. As the king's agent, Stanley built roads, outposts, and even a railroad and earned the nickname Bula Matari, or Breaker of Rocks, because of his tireless construction efforts. Many historians will still disagree on how much he actually knew about Leopold's true plans, but the infrastructure he created would later help facilitate years of forced labor and violence that may have led to the deaths of millions of Congolese. This controversy followed Stanley, and in 1887, when he led an African expedition to rescue Emin Pasha, a German territorial governor who was under attack from Muslim rebels in southern Sudan. This journey would be a complete disaster. Stanley split the expedition in half, and would eventually reach Pasha in 1888 with his front column of explorers. But not before several hundred members of his party perished from disease and pygmy attacks. But the second half of the expedition party that was at the rear were committing horrific atrocities as they were unsupervised. The members of this party indiscriminately tortured and murdered mass amounts of Africans. The Pasha expedition was Stanley's final expedition. He returned to London in 1890 and would author books and tour the lecture circuit before serving in the British Parliament. He was overall hailed as a hero and was knighted by Queen Victoria. But in the early 20th century, the brutality of the Congo Free State began to come to light, and it cast a permanent shadow over his career. He later died in 1904, and his connection to the Congo atrocities led to him being denied burial at Westminster Abbey, alongside his old associate, David Livingstone.
That was an interesting story.
Yeah. That was a Civil War soldier who would go on to, I mean, it's wild to put those, like, an explorer in the African Congo was a Civil War soldier.
Yeah.
An American Civil War soldier. Like, it's just putting those two things together, like, on a timeline scale, almost don't make sense.
Right.
Because, like, the American Civil War was not that long ago. Like, in the grand scheme, it was just
we'll get into at least one more thing like that in the next episode. I sit and think about things that I'm like, in my head, it seems like this thing seemed like it happened so long ago.
Yeah.
But then when you really think about it, it really wasn't that long ago.
Right.
Those things hurt my brain.
Even just like, I don't know, we'll get into it, but like thinking about going back to the last episode, talking about the moon phases.
Yeah.
And like thinking about my life as a moon phase.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, baby, I'm in the third quarter.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's why it hit me so hard when I was writing those notes for that episode. Because I was like, babe,
it's time to start getting your shit together.
Babe, we're waning.
All right. So this last one, it's a little lengthy, and I did go in depth on the history. But there is some ghosty stuff toward the end. So I'm going to talk about the Beauregard Keys house. Now, we're going to notice something here. And my obsession with New Orleans.
Yeah.
Listen, for me to be born, raised, and still living in the state of Tennessee, and I have only ever visited this city twice in my whole life and can only really remember the last one, that place feels like home. It is so welcoming.
Yeah.
I would live there. I couldn't live like in the city portion, but like catch me on the outskirts, you know?
Right.
Where it's not so busy. Anyway, so just on the outskirts of the French Quarter, across from the old Ursuline Convent on Chartres Street, the New Orleans Beauregard Keys house houses more than one ghost. The home gets its name from its two most famous residents, Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard and writer Francis Parkinson Keys. It is now owned by the Keys Foundation, established by Francis Parkinson Keys, that promised the preservation of the house and the garden that she herself restored. The house was constructed in 1826 and has had plenty of residents to add to their chapter of the book on its life. And since I know y'all love a good history lesson, we're going to discuss the bigger contributors. Because I am a firm believer that, like, every haunted place has a backstory that got it to where it is.
Right.
Like, what happened in that house throughout history is why it's haunted. So that's why I like digging into it, and more than just being like, oh yeah, at this house there's this ghost. This is why, you know? So from 1825 to 1833, we have, in the early early 18th century, the lot at 1113 Chartres Street was originally planned to be a weapons arsenal for the growing city of New Orleans. However, when the Ursuline nuns arrived from France in 1726, the King of France signed over the entire block to them, and it remained religious land until 1825. That's when Joseph Le Carpentier, a wealthy auctioneer from Haiti, purchased the property and began planning his grand home. Architect Francis Carol, it's French-ish, Carolles, who had been born to parents who had fled the 1791 revolution in Saint Domingue, now Haiti, and raised in Baltimore, was chosen to design the house. He was one of the first native-born Americans to make a name for himself as an architect in New Orleans, and his work blends American influences with the local Creole architectural style. However, it seems there were some disagreements during the building process, as the first architect and builder were dismissed just 2 months after their contracts were signed. They were replaced by him and James Lambert, a free person of color from New Orleans. Le Carpentier and his family lived in the home for some time, but by 1835 they moved to Royal Street, where they lived with his daughter, Louise Thérèse Felicity Delcide Le Carpentier, and her husband, Michael Alonzo Morphy, a well-known attorney and judge on the Supreme Court. The wedding of Louise and Michael, or Michel, took place at 1113 Chartres. The couple went on to have a son, Charles Paul Morphy, born on June 22nd of 1837. Paul Morphy would grow up to become a world-renowned chess champion known for his prodigious skill at a young age, defeating players much older and more experienced than himself. Despite his fame, Paul struggled to transition to a legal career, as his reputation in the chess world overshadowed his attempts at law. He was found dead in his bathtub, possibly from a heat stroke, at the age of 39. The Le Carpentier family eventually sold the property to Swiss immigrant John Merle, who was serving as the Swiss consul in New Orleans. It was Merle's wife, Madame Anais Philopon Merle, who transformed the space by designing the parterre garden. She had 2 tall brick walls erected. I used it to enclose the garden. I, honest to God, was like trying to find another word to use instead of erected. And I was like, I'll just leave it. She had 2 tall brick walls erected to enclose the garden and added 2 iron-laced windows so that passerbys could look in. The garden, lush and vibrant, became known as a jungle by the locals in the French Quarter. Typically, gardens and courtyards were placed in the rear of the houses to shield them from overpowering stench of the area and to maintain an appearance of humility, a cultural preference of the Creoles. Madame Merle's garden, however, with its visible beauty and open design, surely upset the Creoles, who were already uneasy about the mix of French and American architectural influences in the house. Eventually, the Merles also faced financial difficulties and were forced to sell the property despite its early beauty and history, and the house would once again change hands. John Amy Merle bought the house from the Le Carpentier family in 1833. Hold on. So it just kind of goes on. Okay, I see what I did. I'm like, did I repeat this stuff again? I remember writing this now. What y'all have to know is I wrote half of this a month ago.
Yeah.
And then I came back and finished it this past week. Anyway, so Merle bought the house from the Le Carpentier family in 1833, and he was later to become the Swiss consul to New Orleans. We talked about his wife who designed that garden. John was from a well-known Swiss family, which helped him take on a leading role in Swiss affairs in New Orleans, and was named president of a Swiss benevolent society in 1837. This later led to his becoming the Swiss consul. Shortly after that, the Merle family found itself in financial hardships, possibly because of the financial panic of 1837, and on December 10th of 1840, the parish court for the city of New Orleans demanded they sell the 17 parcels of real estate, 46 slaves, and various stocks to be paid to his creditors. And don't you know that the house was one of the things to go. Now, this garden I told you about earlier, they built this just before the house was taken. This was the very inspiration for Miss Keyes to restore this home. Fun fact, when Merle died in 1847, he was buried in the Garrod Street Cemetery and then in 1957, that same cemetery was destroyed to make a place for the Superdome. The slab that had been inscribed for her tomb, or when Miss Merle died, my bad. When the slab that had been inscribed for her tomb was found and given to Miss Keyes, and then she mounted it on the wall of the garden, and it's still there today. The house in the garden was purchased from the Merle's creditors in 1841 by the widow of Bernard Noel Andry. Her name was Josephine Laveau Trudeau. Her daughter, Adonai Andry, moved on into the house next to her after her marriage to L. Armand Gardel. Madame Andry and her daughter continued to maintain and improve the garden. But when she died, her daughter and her husband inherited the house. They continued to live there until the end of the Civil War. Now, as we already know, enslaved, and I left this in because it's significant to the history. As we already know, enslaved people of African descent lived there. And it's likely that they were kept in the second story of the quarters behind the house, from the time that the house was built until most likely 1864, when the state constitution first abolished slavery. That building still stands there today, and I wanted to just, like I said, keep that in there because it just adds to the story of the house.
Yeah.
In 1865, Dominique Lanata, a grocer and the consul general of Sardinia in New Orleans, purchased the property, intending to use it as a rental investment. Lanata leased the property for nearly 4 decades, with his first tenant sealing the house's fate. Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard, one of the most respected generals of the Confederate Army, moved in with his family after the Civil War. Beauregard, born in St. Bernard Parish in 1818 to wealthy Creole planters, had a storied military career, commanding troops in major battles such as Bull Run, Shiloh, and the Siege of Corinth. In 1864, he played a pivotal role in saving Petersburg, Virginia, which helped protect the Confederate capital of Richmond. After the war, Beauregard returned to New Orleans, hoping to find a new position. However, his wife's family had auctioned off their ancestral home, leaving Beauregard and his 2 sons without a place to stay. He rented the entire house from Lanata in 1865. His second wife, Marguerite Caroline Deslandes, had died while he was away, and the general's family lived at the property for around 18 months before moving to 229 Royal Street in 1868. Despite only renting the house briefly, locals began referring to it as the Old Beauregard House, and it became closely associated with the general's legacy. Beauregard, born to Creole planters, spoke only French until his teens when he attended military school in New York. He later graduated second in his class from West Point and worked on several engineering projects before serving in the Mexican-American War. Afterward, he took on various engineering responsibilities in New Orleans, including working on the U.S. Customs House. His personal life was marked by tragedy, as his first wife, Marie Antoinette Lar Villers, passed away shortly after giving birth to their daughter in 1850. Beauregard remarried 10 years later to Marguerite Caroline Deslandes, whose brother was Louisiana Senator John Slidell. Beauregard resigned from his post as superintendent of West Point to join the Confederate Army, where he became famous for his leadership and contributions. After the war, he became president of the New Orleans, Jackson, and Great Northern Railroad, and later worked as the commissioner of the Louisiana Lottery. Nothing, perhaps, could have prepared the locals and neighbors of the house for the events that would unfold under its new ownership in 1904. Lenatus sold the property to the, I'm going to say, Jacona family, originally from Sicily, and they were heavily involved in wholesale liquor business. They initially lived lavishly in the old Beauregard house, converting the basement into a wine cellar to support their business, Jacona and Co., which was run by Pietro and Maria Crocefisa and her son, Corrado. For a time, it seemed like business was booming and the family enjoyed the comforts of their wealth. However, rumors soon began to spread that things weren't as idyllic as they had appeared in the house. In their quest for prosperity, the Jaconas were seen by the Sicilian Black Hand, a local sect of the mafia, as intruding on their territory. The name Black Hand referred to their brutal extortion methods, and the Jaconas became the target of the gang's demands. The family received numerous threatening letters, pressuring them to pay up or face dire consequences. In an attempt to resolve the tension, Pietro Jacona invited 4 members of the Black Hand to dinner at the house. What followed, however, would seal the Jaconas family's infamy. At some point during the meal, Pietro and his son Corrado stood up, retrieved their pistols, and opened fire on the men. 3 of the extortionists were killed instantly, while the 4th was severely injured and managed to escape. He didn't get far, though. Wounded and desperate, he crawled through the cobblestone streets before being captured by the authorities. The murder scene was chilling. Pietro's 2 young daughters were just down the hall in their bedrooms, unaware of the bloodshed taking place in the back gallery. Despite the clear connections to the mafia, the violent nature of the killings, the Jaconas were not immediately convicted. The case went to court, but in 1910 the charges were dropped on the grounds of self-defense, with substantial support from the local Italian community, which had railed behind the Jacona family. By this time, however, the house had changed. Neighbors remarked that the house had become almost unrecognizable, a fortress boarded up and secured, reflecting the Jaconas' increasingly tense and isolated lifestyle. The family continued to live there for several more years, but by 1925, the men of the Jacona family had vanished. Pietro, once a patriarch, had disappeared, leaving the women of the family who had witnessed the murder on their own. According to a later interview with one of the surviving daughters at Loyola University, the sisters left to fend for themselves, made money by sewing baby clothes and selling them in the French Quarter. As the Jaconas abandoned the house and stopped paying taxes, the property faced the threat of demolition. After years of tension, tragedy, and mafia ties, 1113 Rue Chartres, once a grand symbol of wealth, was on the brink of being lost to time. The Jacona family, who had lived in the house from 1904 to 1925, left behind a legacy of bloodshed and secrets, and the house would soon be auctioned off, leaving behind its place in New Orleans history. The old Beauregard house, which had witnessed the lives of so many influential figures over the years, now stood as a stark reminder of the city's complicated cultural and criminal past. During the early 20th century, the house fell into a state of severe disrepair. However, it was spared from demolition when it was purchased on July 8th of 1926 by General Allison Owen, a prominent New Orleans architect. His father, William Myler Owen, had been one of the founding members of Louisiana Historical Association. General Owen's acquisition of the property allowed for the formation of Beauregard House Incorporated, an organization created with the goal of preserving the house as a memorial to General Beauregard. Although plans to establish a Beauregard memorial were delayed, The house's connection to his legacy remained intact. For several years, portions of the house were used by various groups, including the Warrington House, a shelter for homeless men, and Alcoholics Anonymous. During this time, only minimal repairs were carried out, but they were sufficient to prevent the house from deteriorating further. In 1925, the house was on the verge of demolition again, and was even slated to be converted into a macaroni factory. Fortunately, a group of determined women, with the support of General Owen, intervened and successfully saved the house. Their aim was to transform it into a memorial for General Beauregard, and to support his vision, they founded Beauregard House Incorporated as a foundation for the future museum. However, financial constraints prevented the establishment of the memorial, and instead the house served various purposes over the years then. In the 1930s, a historic survey was conducted which provided comprehensive documentation over the property, including detailed drawings and architectural information that continue to be invaluable to the museum today. In 1944, the author Francis Parkinson Keyes rented the second floor of the house, while AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, occupied the basement. In 1925, we're going back. Hold on. So we're going to go back a little bit here. So in 1925, the house was put up for auction. Antonio Menino, who was a Jacona by marriage, purchased the property and threatened to tear it down unless preservationists stepped in. His plans to transform the historic building into the macaroni factory. So that's where that came in. Apparently his threats worked, as the preservationists quickly rallied to save the property. Hold on, I'm trying to get through the mumbo jumbo here because it was very late when I was finishing this. In 1945, Francis Parkinson Keyes moved in, began extensive renovations, reintroducing the parterre garden that had fallen into disrepair. It was here, in the house's quiet and storied atmosphere, that she penned 30 novels, including Dinner at Antone's and The Chess Players, the latter about the famed chess champion Paul Morphy. Keyes spent her winters at the house until her death in 1970. After her passing, the Keyes Foundation, which she had established, continued to operate the house as a museum, preserving its rich history. Francis Parkinson Keyes recounted her serendipitous connection to the Beauregard house in the author's note of Madame Castell's lodger. My original
words are hard.
Yeah. I think it's Tenancy, and I don't know if I just typed it wrong.
Tenacity?
I don't know. But anyway, this of the Beauregard house was apparently a happy accident. I stumbled on it when I was searching for temporary headquarters, and nothing seemed available. But I have long since ceased to believe that such occurrences are accidental. I'm convinced that they are part of a pattern in which power higher than ours has a hand. With the help of architect Sam Wilson, Keyes restored the house to its former glory, infusing it with new life and historical significance. She and the Keyes Foundation maintained the property as a museum after her death, honoring the house's legacy and its colorful past. Keyes, a prolific and successful novelist, moved to New Orleans in the 1940s to research Crescent Carnival, a novel about the history of Mardi Gras. In 1944 is when she rented the second story of the house. In exchange for her rent, she began the restoration. Although she initially used the house as a winter residence, it soon became her permanent home. During her time there, she hosted numerous parties, welcoming famous guests such as the Duke and Duchess of Windsor in 1950, as well as New Orleans culinary legend Ella Brennan and silent film stars Harold Lloyd and Mildred Davis. Keyes' friendship with Laurie Clarendon, General Beauregard's granddaughter, also proved significant as it led to many of Beauregard's heirlooms being donated to the house, further enriching its historical collection. Keyes spent her final years in the house, passing away there in 1970. Today, the Keyes Foundation continues to operate the house as a museum, ensuring that 1113 Rue Chartres remains a treasured piece of New Orleans history thanks to Keyes' passion for preservation and her enduring connection to the property. So the house is not only a historical landmark, but it's also a hotbed for paranormal activity. So here we go with the spookier things.
Yeah.
Over the years, many visitors and locals have reported eerie occurrences at the property, leading many to believe that it's one of the most haunted sites in the French Quarter. The ghosts of the past seem to linger there as if unwilling to leave a place so steeped in violence, tragedy, and turmoil. The most frequently reported paranormal phenomenon is the presence of Civil War soldiers. Ghostly figures dressed in gray or butternut uniforms have been seen standing motionless, gazing off into the distance. These apparitions are said to disappear as suddenly as they appear, leaving behind a lingering sense of unease. After World War II, sightings of these soldiers became more common, with witnesses hearing gunfire, groaning, shouting, and even catching the scent of musket smoke on the wind. Victor Klein, in his 1993 book, New Orleans Ghosts, I have that book. I didn't even think about that. I do have that book. I think you bought me that book.
Maybe.
It described the haunting scenes. Men with mangled limbs and blown away faces swirl in a confused dance of death. Horses and mules appear and are slaughtered by grape shot and cannon. The pungent smell of blood and decay permeated the restless atmosphere. Many speculate that these ghostly soldiers could be spirits of men who died in the many bloody battles that General Pierre-Gustave Toutant Beauregard fought in, such as the Battle of Bull Run or the Battle of Shiloh. Tim Nealon, a paranormal investigator, offers a theory of attachment, the idea that spirits can latch on to an object or place where they experience death. General Beauregard's many battles and his exposure to death may have left objects in the house that serve as attachment points for these restless spirits, which I do have to think with Keyes, the author, having that connection with his granddaughter, and she got some of the heirlooms and stuff. Yeah. Spirits attached to that as well, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Indeed, some claim to have seen Beauregard's own ghost. Francis Parkinson Keyes, the writer who lived in the house for many years, once remarked that Beauregard's spirit pokes around at night looking for his boots, as he had been buried without them. Whether or not Beauregard's ghost wanders the halls is unclear, but the haunting presence of soldiers seems to suggest that his spirit may still be tethered to the house. In addition to these Civil War era apparitions, the spirits of slaves are also believed to haunt the property. The Beauregard Keyes house was constructed using slave labor in the 1820s, and some believe that the suffering and hardship endured by these workers has left a spiritual mark on the house. Some visitors have reported hearing cries and screams emanating from the walls at night, believed to be the restless souls of the enslaved laborers who built the home. The house also witnessed the brutal murder of 3 mobsters at the hands of Pietro Giacona and his son in the early 1900s. His attempt to defend his family's territory from a local gang of extortionists led to a bloody showdown in the house, and some believe that the spirits of the slain men still remain trapped within the walls. Their lingering presence could explain some of the violent or unsettling energy that has been reported by visitors over the years. Keyes, the last private owner of the house, is also thought to haunt the property. She spent her winters there restoring the house and using it as her writing sanctuary. She passed away in 1970, and some believe that her spirit still lingers, keeping watch over the home she lovingly restored. It is said that she occasionally appears, checking on her garden or ensuring the house is being cared for. Finally, there are those who believe in a more sinister entity that may be haunting the house, a malevolent force capable of driving people to madness. Paul Morphy, a world-renowned chess champion and the grandson of Beauregard, famously had a mental breakdown while living in the house. Morphy was found running naked through the streets of New Orleans, wielding an axe and threatening anyone who came near. He later claimed that he had been possessed by something in the house. While some believe this was the result of personal demons or mental illness, others suggest that the strange atmosphere of the house may have had something to do with this breakdown. The exact identity of the spirits that haunt the Beauregard Keys house remains a mystery, but one thing is clear, the house is far from empty. Visitors can still feel the weight of the history pressing in on them as they walk through its rooms and gardens. Whether it's the restless souls of soldiers, slaves, mobsters, or even Frances Parkinson Keys herself, it seems the spirits of the past are reluctant to leave this historic home behind. If you're brave enough, you might just catch a glimpse of one of those specters during a tour of the house, but be warned. Once you enter, you may never leave without a sense of the past lingering with you.
Fair enough.
So, yeah, that story took me a month to write.
Did you know that there's a cornbread festival?
No.
It's in Smithville.
I should know about that.
Middle Tennessee Cornbread Festival.
Huh. Is it fairly new?
I don't know. 5th annual. So since 2020.
So it's fairly new.
Yeah. That's crazy. That's like ambitious. Start a festival with like peak COVID times. Especially when
they said, is it later in the year?
No, actually. No, I think. No, it's May 17th.
So that's the point where somebody was like, I'm sick of this.
Yeah. Unless they did it right before. Or like maybe the first one they did later in the year.
Maybe, because it hit, like, we were supposed to go to New Orleans that year.
Yeah.
Like in March or April, I think.
I think it was March.
And then we couldn't go because of COVID.
Yeah. Because, like, his mom, right when, like, all the countries were shutting down, she was in Ireland.
I think I remember that.
Yeah. And we were like, girl, you got to cancel your trip. They're not going to let you back. Like, you got to come back.
Like his mom, not.
Yeah, no, his mom was in Ireland. Like, may not see you you might get stuck there for a couple weeks. Could you imagine? Because we thought it was just going to be a couple weeks.
No.
Life has not been the same since. Like, for the most part, like, things have gone back to a semblance of normal. But, like, there's still things that are, like, a sign of the times.
Right.
Like, I see more people wearing masks if they're feeling just ill.
Yeah. Which is appreciated.
Right, which I greatly appreciate, because, like, please.
I was pro-mask the whole time.
Oh, yeah. Like, I mean, honestly, I think it's, like, that should be a common practice. It shouldn't be, like, I've seen videos of people, like, giving other people shit for wearing a mask, and it's, like, what does that have? Like, if anything, they're keeping you, like, they're trying to help keep you from getting sick.
Right. I mean, even if it's just like it's the flu or a cold.
It's not a political thing or whatever. It's just common courtesy. Don't be coming in here. Like, we literally where were we? And I was so annoyed because this lady kept walking around and she kept coughing like this. And I'm like mouth wide open, tongue out. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? Like, that's why, I don't know. Anyway,
people that don't cover their cough drive me nuts. And then, like, people that are so inconsiderate to other people and will just, like, cough in their general vicinity.
Yeah. And I'm like, I swear to God, if I get sick, I will find you. And it's on site. Start swinging on them.
Last weekend when I went and got this tattoo.
Yeah.
He wasn't in my face. Like, I mean, he was, like, right here, you know? Mm-hmm. And I had my head kind of turned this way. But, like, while he was doing this one, at one point, it caused me to get that, like, the combination between him tattooing right here and his hand resting, like, right here. I got that tickle.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, no. Because he's going to town right there.
Right.
And I have to cough. And so I felt him kind of, like, lift up a little bit. And I'm like, okay, can we pause for half a second? I got to cough. And he goes, I saw you struggling. That's why I stopped. Which is probably why that spot in that tail is there.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
But, yeah, so.
That's the worst.
Which, fun fact that we haven't shared in the past 2 episodes that we recorded. I got a new tattoo last weekend.
Oh, yeah.
It was nice.
You literally, like, told me, oh, I want to get this tattoo.
Yeah.
And then the next thing I know, you're posting on Facebook that you went and got this tattoo.
No, I literally sent you the picture of it as soon as I got done.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But
I was like, oh, that's cute.
So here's the story on it. Because I'm done with my story, so we're done with this subject, correct? Yeah. You're done? Okay.
Yeah, I'm done.
So here's the story on it. So I decided I wanted this tattoo, and like this was the tattoo that I had in mind when we were going to go to Vegas and get tattoos.
Yeah.
But I was going to get it like here.
Mm-hmm.
And so we ended up not getting them because it was too expensive there.
Yeah.
And so I've just been kind of sitting on it. Well, then this particular artist and his business partner were at another shop.
Yeah.
And then had to shut that down for personal reasons. Then this particular artist went to another shop, and I had reached out to this other shop, same shop that we went to for this one.
Yeah.
And I had reached out to this artist prior to Christmas. Because I wanted to get this tattoo.
Yeah.
So then something happened. I wasn't able to go and get it done. Money, I'm sure, because of Christmas.
Yeah.
And so then I finally was just like, okay, I want to get this done. And then, like, TJ had scheduled an appointment elsewhere in the meantime because he was getting a Disney tattoo. And this tattoo artist that he found, like, Disney tattoos is what she does.
Yeah.
And so he wanted her to do it. And so I'm glad that he did. Like, I feel bad because we had previously talked to the artist that did mine about his.
Yeah.
But, like, I think he's done a couple Disneys, but, like, that's not his thing. And this was her thing, you know? And you want an artist that's going to be excited and, you know, whatever. And this girl apparently really was excited, like, kept calling people over while she was doing it and saying, look what I'm getting to do. Look at this cool tattoo. And it turned out really good. Did you see it?
Yeah, I did.
It turned out really good. Yeah. But anyway, so he had scheduled that appointment with her, and that was supposed to be like last Saturday. And so the more I sat and thought about it, I was like, man, I'm ready to go get another one. I have tattoo money right now. Like, let me reach out.
Yeah.
So I did. And he was like, yeah, you can come in this weekend. And I was like, can you do tomorrow night? Because then my thought process, because TJ had said something about me finding somewhere for the littles to go. And then me and Maddie going with him to get his because she wants to be a tattoo artist when she graduates.
Yeah.
So, you know, he was trying to give her the opportunity to see like a tattoo shop from the inside and see what goes on. And so then he realized, well, it says on the website for this shop that, you know, you can bring people with you, but they're primarily going to have to sit in the front lobby because there's not enough room in the back for them to stay back there. Like, they can come back and check in on progress from time to time, but they have to stay up front most of the time. So I was like, that's really not going to be any fun for me and her to have to sit up there in the lobby for the most part, you know, for 3 or 4 hours, however long this one's going to take. So I was like, but I could go and get a tattoo and take her with me at this shop and she could sit with us.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I got that figured out. We went Friday night. She went with me. Now, I told her, we have previously discussed that she's Pisces.
Right.
And that she's very talkative.
Right.
I had previously said to her, I said, okay, look, I know you're excited. I know you are. But, like, the person that's doing my tattoo really needs to focus on what they're doing. So, like, let's not talk about just, like, random high school bullshit, okay?
Right.
Like, let's just not share your whole life story this time.
Yeah.
Like, what I'm bringing you here for is the experience and for you to really take in what goes on.
Mm-hmm.
There was nobody else there getting tattooed at the time. So it's not like she had like 2 different artists going so she could, you know, kind of compare.
Yeah.
But we go in and like my artist puts on music and then like the playlist was bipolar.
Yeah.
Because it was like some rock stuff and then it went to Sabrina Carpenter. So they started talking about playlists.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Maddie and her music.
Yeah.
So then they were talking about that. Now, I will say that the artist handled her very well.
Yeah.
And spoke to her and listened to her. And the other artist that was there that has done one of my tattoos as well, engaged in conversation some too. But I could just tell that she was doing that thing that she doesn't realize she's doing, and that's fine. And I don't berate her for it.
Yeah.
That she's just talking and talking and talking and talking. And I'm trying not to, because she hates it when she does that. And I shoot her looks of, I really wish you would like calm down for a minute.
Yeah.
Because she sees that as me being upset with her.
Right.
When really I'm just trying to get her to realize she needs to reel it in a little bit.
Right.
And so I was trying not to do that. And like the subtle gestures that I was making toward her, she wasn't grasping.
Mm-hmm.
And she just kept going, which my artist, like engaged.
Right.
And would ask questions. You know, so it was okay, but I did text him afterwards and was like, I'm really sorry that she talked y'all's ears off.
Yeah.
But she really liked it. She enjoyed it. It was a good experience for her.
Mm-hmm.
But I told her, she said something about coming back next time I get a tattoo there. And I was like, no. She was like, why? I was like, okay, I brought you to this one because I wanted you to see.
Yeah.
I said, but what you will come to understand when you're older is that tattoo time is therapy time.
Yeah.
I said, we either have brief conversation with the artist or we sit in silence.
Yeah.
Because we're feeling our feelings. And I said, you know, no. And I was thinking about it last night because I'm already like itching for another one. Because I was like, I could go and get like a shop minimum tattoo tonight. Because like they said on Facebook that they were taking walk-ins tonight. And I'm like, I could. And I'm like, do I feel like I got robbed a little bit of the full tattoo experience that last one? Yeah. But it's fine because I was doing something good for my kid. So,
yeah.
But I'm ready to get another one already. Whereas you're sitting over here like, if I never got another one, I'd be fine. Yeah. I don't understand that. I mean, I get it.
There was a point in my life where I wouldn't have said that. I'd have been like, come on, give it to me. But I'm just over here like.
You have significantly more than I do, I think.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
So.
Most of mine are like little ones, though.
Yeah.
Like, I've gotten like smaller ones. Like, let me do a quick count. So, if you count, are we counting the ones that are underneath?
Yeah.
Okay, so this would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
I have. Because I've never had any covered.
And that includes 2 cover-ups.
Yeah. I've never had any covered. Would you consider this one to be 1 or 2?
Is that the...
That's the semicolon one. I mean, it was 1 session, but it's 2 separate.
1.
Okay. This would be 1?
Yeah.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 8.
Yeah. But you also do have some that are larger. Than what I have.
Yeah.
And are more like involved.
That one on your arm, your cat, that's large.
I announced I'm done. Like, he's going to add some stuff over here just to balance it out. But as far as like working on filling in this cat more, I'm done. I can't sit through it anymore.
Yeah.
Like, and I told him I was like because so.
Did he bring his stuff with him last time?
No, but so for anybody not in the know, so my ex-husband and I got tattoos together. And we got spy versus spy. He got white spy, I got black spy. Because I was like, I don't want you to have to sit through that. I should have let his ass sit through that. After everything I ended up dealing with and having to go through the cover-up process, I should have let him sit through that. Because that girl single-needled that whole tattoo.
I feel like that might be what's wrong with this one.
But like, so, and you can, I can. To the naked eye, if you don't know that it's there, you're probably not really going to see it.
Right.
But I can still see the original tattoo under it, even though it's basically been just blacked out.
Yeah.
So I initially just wanted it blacked out. I was like, let's just do like a triangle or something on my forearm, black it out, be done with it. Well, my brother-in-law, he was like, well, he's like, let me come up with something. So he was like, well, let me do a cat, just a black cat. We'll put some like, I've got some stars and a crescent moon. And then he's put like some crystals and some mushrooms to the side. So it's not just a blacked out, spot. And, but he's got the tail that wraps around, because I have another tattoo on this wrist that I didn't want covered up. And so he's wrapped the tail around, and it's at that like fine, like where your skin's like real thin, right where it meets my hand. And I wear an Apple Watch anyway. So I told him, I was like, and we've had 2 sessions on this tattoo. And each time I get about an hour in, and then I'm squirming. But this time I broke it to him, and I was like, I know that this tail looks like absolute dog shit. Like, it looks terrible. And he was like, yeah, I really don't like that, and I was like, I'm done. I was like, I wear a watch. The tail is covered anyway. I was like, most of the time, if I'm out and about, I have that watch on. I was like, and that band covers the tail. Yeah. I said, I do not care about that tail. I said, because the thought of sitting through another session to try and get this tail to look decent makes me want to literally rip my skin off. I was like, I can't do it. He's like, well, I definitely want to. And I was like, I'll sit through that. I was like, I'll sit through adding, for the balance of it and to make it a complete tattoo. Yeah. I was like, and that's new. There's nothing to cover there. Clean up the lines, because, there are some blown out lines just because I'm a squirmer. Like, and I haven't made it easy. Even with numbing cream on this thing. It is one of the most excruciating tattoo experiences of my life. And I'm not, because the original tattoo was so scarred that it's just made it incredibly painful. Like, to the point that the additions to the side of it are almost a huge, like, when he gets to those, I can, it's like a relief. Yeah. Because he's let off of that, scarring. And because, like, the last session, he was like, I know. He's like, you and your sister are the same way. He was like, you get about an hour into a tattoo. He's like, and I can almost time it. He's like, and then the both of you start slowly, like, squirming. You start, getting more uncomfortable. And I was like, even with music or scroll, usually if I'm on my phone and I'm distracted, it really doesn't bother me. Now, what I did enjoy was when we got our Spotify tattoos, the stress ball. Yeah. And I told him about it when he was here. I said, put one in your kit. I said, for somebody who's not wanting to do. And I told Danny, because he kind of struggled with his leg one. He was like sitting there like, this is kind of, this hurts. And I was like, stress ball. I was like, that spot on your leg, because that's where my balloons are. That's not comfortable. No, it does not feel good. And I was like, I told him, I said, throw a stress ball or 2 into your kit just to have. I was like, because that was like life changing. Yeah. I was like, because I didn't have numbing cream or nothing. I just balls to the walled it this time. I was like, did it hurt? Yeah. I said, but having that stress ball to distract my other hand. They don't hurt. Like, that's my thing. I really anticipated this one on my arm to hurt. Yeah. It didn't. See, this one didn't hurt. There was parts that I was like, but it wasn't
this didn't hurt. I fully anticipated this was going to be my most painful. It's on my like chest.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've got one, and
I really thought it was gonna hurt.
Yeah. See, mine wasn't. It was the only time it really hurt was when she would get close to the collarbone, and I could feel it vibrate in my collarbone.
See,
but it wasn't too bad, and I think Allie's was the same. But
it didn't. It just the one on my leg. It was a little because it took a while. It's by far my largest and most in depth.
Mm-hmm.
It hurt after a little bit. I did have to take one break mainly because I had to pee.
Yeah.
But it was bad, and I feel so bad for that tattoo artist because the way she had me laying, and then my dumbass thought it was going to be a great idea to wear a dress.
Oh.
I'm so sure she got to see my whole stuff. But whatever.
See, and I thought, because I've got a small little tattoo on my foot, like on the inner, on the inner arch of my foot. It just says fiction, and I've had it touched up, and that touch up was just, I thought that was just the end all be all of the pain of I could be in for a tattoo.
Right.
But I think just having, because I did not want to carry around a tattoo that I shared with my ex-husband.
Right.
Because I know his ass ain't getting his covered up. He probably, I don't know if he thinks
I
I'm
ain't
still
thought
running.
about looking when I see him.
Like, I just don't know if, like, he thinks I'm still running around with the other half. I don't know. But I was like, as soon as my divorce, the ink was barely dry. The judge had barely signed this paper. And I was like, Carl, I need this shit off me.
Yeah.
So we covered up the one first.
Yeah.
And then worked on the other one. And as painful as it was,
it worth it.
It was worth it to have it off my body. But I think it ruined me. I think it has ruined me.
See, did you get the shakes and stuff? Like, were you?
No, I've never gotten the shake.
I haven't either, and I feel bad. Like, well, when I got my leg tattoo, when we were in Savannah, there was a girl there that was like, I want to say it was the second installment of this.
I don't think I've ever gotten the shakes. I mean, maybe Carl could, because Carl's done my last.
Right.
Like,
well, this girl had been there for hours, and she was starting to. Yeah. And so it was bad. TJ said this one that he got last weekend, there was a dude in there that came in at the same time he did. His took about 3.5, maybe 4 hours. Nah, 3 hours. He said dude got there the same time he did, but he was getting it on his like stomach.
Ooh.
And he said about the time that he was getting done, this dude was like really shaking, and he was like, buddy, I think we're gonna have to be done. And he was like, no man, let me finish this one spot. Like, you can do it. And for another 45 minutes at least, dude was still going.
Yeah.
But I felt bad because when I got this one, it being on my chest, I had to, like, I wore a tank top, and then I put a sweatshirt on over top of it to get there. And then when I got there, I took off my sweatshirt and just kind of pulled my arm out of the tank top and my bra. Yeah. And so it's January, and it was very cold. And it was kind of chilly in that shop. Yeah. So I instantly, whenever I took my sweatshirt off, Maddie's like, what is wrong with your skin? Because I started turning purple because I'm cold. And so I was like, I'm just cold. So, like, I laid down on the table, and he started going. And then I'm, like, shaking. But it wasn't because of this. Yeah. And it felt like it was only on this, like, the opposite side of my body. Because I was so cold. Yeah. And I was like, I really hope that he doesn't think that I'm a pansy and I'm shaking because this hurts, because that's not the case. I'm shaking because I'm cold and I'm like purple. And I was like half tempted to be like, Maddie, hand me my sweatshirt so I can at least cover up this portion of my body. Yeah. But
hell, I would have.
I was like,
I'd have been like, bro, I'm freezing.
I knew it was only going to take like an hour. And so I was like, I'm not going to stress it too much. I'll be fine for an hour.
I'm a whiny little bitch.
I don't know.
In my old age, if I'm uncomfortable, everybody else gonna know about it.
She's that old lady.
I am.
Lord. Anyway, I think we've gone on long enough on this one.
We have. You got our little chit chat here at the end. So if you stuck around and listened to all about the Civil War and you're listening to this,
it If that doesn't describe our way of podcasting, we never stay on one topic.
No. We'll hit the topic
and then we're going to go on 37 side quests.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're always always anticipate a side quest with our podcast.
For sure. But side quest your ass on out to the social medias.
Yeah.
And follow us on Facebook.
Instagram. Maybe TikTok.
Maybe. Eventually, if we can ever get back in there.
Yeah.
YouTube. Email us at
wandersofweird@gmail.com.
Okay.
Still over it?
Yeah. If we throw out any other socials, then we'll let you guys know on the existing socials.
Yeah.
In the meantime, in case it happens in the month of February before we get together to record again.
Go check out our, as I forgot to mention it last episode.
That time frame's already over.
It doesn't matter. It's a year round.
No, I thought you were going to say something about the other thing that was never claimed.
Never claimed.
Which you put in the description.
Oh, yeah.
You losers don't read our descriptions.
I forgot.
You
Honestly,
could have gotten a whole T-shirt from us, and you neglected. So make sure.
Forgot about it.
You make sure that you're reading the descriptions.
Yeah, read the descriptions. Oh, yeah, because I totally forgot we had a hidden giveaway in the tarot description. So it's too late now. You can't claim it now.
But who knows? We might throw another one out there.
Yeah.
Just for shits and giggles.
Or we might surprise you if you email us. wandersofweird@gmail.com.
Email us some topic ideas.
Yeah.
And we'll...
And say, hey, I listened to the Civil War episode all the way through, and I heard that there was a hidden giveaway. Has it been claimed? Maybe we'll honor it.
Maybe we'll pity your feeble attempt at being reminded.
Beg us, please. I will say, I have noticed that our numbers, like our downloads, are higher when I'm like, I've got posts scheduled and, and I actually put in effort.
Right.
But who knew? Who knew that there would be more listens if we put in just an ounce of effort.
Right.
I'm glad to see it though. We're inching closer and closer to 5,000 downloads, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, it is. And honestly, would be amazing if you guys would get the word out there for us so that we could make some things happen for the podcast.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, support our nonprofit of the month, the Valentine Project. Information will be in the description and on the socials. I guess we'll see you next week.
Okay, bye.
Bye.